Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in.
Jeff, how are you this afternoon?
Hey, Ted, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me to talk about the legal tech job market. And I looked at your background. You spent a lot of time in the staffing world, and it sounds like you're really legal focused. And I looked at some of the jobs that you guys fill in the legal space, and I think it aligns perfectly to our audience. So I think you'll have some great insights to share for folks. But before we jump in, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you do it?
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Ted. I've been in the legal technology industry more or less since 2007, 2006. I started out at the Glenmont Group with Michael Potters, worked my way up there, and then, spent a good decade there, and then moved over to Russell Tobin. And finally, I've been at Pearl since 2016, heading up our legal technology division. When you say I work extensively with law firms, you weren't kidding. I mean, I work with AmLaw 200 firms building out their technology organizations from chief level and on down, working with stakeholders all across the globe. So it's so much fun. And you know what makes it fun? Growing up, I always wanted to be a sports agent, right? And the one thing that was holding me back from being a sports agent is the fact that you actually need a law degree in order to do that. And funny enough, now I'm in the legal industry placing attorneys and people with that type of background, and I'm not a sports agent. So there we go. But that's how I've gotten to where I am today. And I've been at Pearl, and it's a great group over here, and I really enjoy working in this industry.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So the last time you and I spoke, we chatted a little bit. I think it was right around the end of November, which was like the second anniversary of ChatGPT, which seems like a million years ago. It's generative AI is overtaken the headlines these days, especially in legal, which is understandable given that, it's a language-based technology innovation, and we haven't seen a ton of that in quite some time. So what really has changed in terms of attitudes towards investment? Have you seen purse strings open up at all since the advent of ChatGPT and firms really trying to wrap their head about what to do with the tech?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to say, one of the things first and foremost are that firms are looking to invest in, AI, the ChatGPTs. Once ChatGPT was queued up, I feel like law firms felt like they had to take that and move it to the next level. Now, whether it's with a Microsoft product or whether it's with a Gemini, whether it's with, OpenAI, there's so many different options out there that firms are really, really deciding what they want to do and how to implement it. And I feel like, ChatGPT obviously was the springboard for that.
Yeah, it seems like the Goldman report, which is I seem to reference in every podcast that came out and said that 44% of legal tasks could be automated by Gen AI, really scared the hell out of people at the most senior levels, like executive committee level in law firms. And, historically, law firms have underspent in tech by a pretty significant margin. That's not an opinion. There's data on this.
Yeah.
When you compare the percentage of revenue that law firms spend versus other industries like financial services, it is dramatic. And I feel like now there's a little bit of an attitude shift around that. And historically, it has felt like firms have really looked at technology as a cost they need to manage rather than a strategic, differentiator. And I don't know, it seems from where I sit that has changed. Is that your perspective?
100%. I feel like, especially when you're talking about the AmLaw 100, and some of the, boutique firms that are really doing very well, I feel like they feel like they have to up the ante, take the next steps, really differentiate themselves by investing in technology. Keeping the lights on isn't enough for these firms now. So they want to make sure that they're doing something in order to, differentiate themselves, like I said, and make sure that they're sort of setting the standard from that perspective. And I feel like there are some firms that are definitely standing out and firms that are making huge investments in this area in order to make do on this.
Yeah. I'm still not seeing a ton of C-suite roles that are have AI in the title, which I don't even know that that's necessarily needed, but I have seen a few. There's one firm that has a chief AI officer. I'm not sure. They might be AmLaw 200, but not huge. I see a lot of like chief knowledge and AI officer. I see a lot of roles with the title AI in it, but really not in the C-suite. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm seeing the same exact thing. I feel like when it comes to the chief title, firms, unless you really have a group that's dedicated and the whole group is dedicated to AI alone, you're probably not going to have that sort of title. You're more so going to have the innovation. I see innovation with the chief a lot more than you're seeing like knowledge management, because innovation opens up the possibilities. Knowledge management is a little bit boxed in as far as the title is concerned. So a lot of firms are going chief innovation and knowledge, solutions, or chief innovation officer. You're seeing a lot more CNOs. But yeah, you don't see too many firms that have the AI just because there's not enough bodies that are underneath that dedicated to AI in order to do that.
Yeah, I just read an article today on law.com about a survey that was done by the Blickstein Group, Brad Blickstein, and FTI Consulting. And in the report, 62% of inside counsel either mostly disagreed or strongly disagreed that their law firms are innovative, which doesn't surprise me. I feel like there's been a lot of innovation theater in legal where, and I've been in the KM space for a long time, have a lot of good friends who are on the law firm side and know a few where the word innovation popped up, but the role really didn't change. So I feel like law firms are battling, they have a perception battle on their hands with, because things move so slow in legal. So it sounds like, maybe that's starting to change. Maybe some of this innovation theater that's been taking place will turn it. And then that's obviously not true across the board. There are innovation teams within the AmLaw that are doing really amazing, innovative things to transform the practice of law. But historically, I mean, that's been the perception, is law firms aren't innovative. Do you agree with that?
Well, that's I think you made some really good points on whether firms are. I feel like firms are taking the steps now to take the innovation ideas that were out there or sort of roadmapped and now sort of deploying these. It's taken a while, but I feel like firms are definitely taking the steps towards actually doing something about it. There's been a lot of changes that I feel like, due to some stuff that's going on with the economy now and some of the, rising in that area, I feel like firms feel a little bit more secure in the investment. When we were coming, 2022, early 23, firms were a little remiss to, make that huge investment, because once you delve in, it's hard to back out. So you need to be 100% sure that you're going all in. It's like poker. If you're going all in, you better believe that you have the cards to win. If not, you're not going to do it. You'll lose all your money quick on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue. One of the things I wanted to talk about was, how the economic conditions out there have influenced law firm budgets and, tech budgets and staffing. And, law firms are highly sensitive to, and rightly so, to, head and tailwinds in the economy, because when things when things start to tighten up, one of the first areas that big corporations that are the big buyers of legal services, one of the places they look to for savings is on outside counsel. And but it feels like the pendulum has swung back a little bit, like post COVID, when the Fed dumped trillions of dollars of liquidity into the markets or into the economy, and we had kind of the growth at all costs with SaaS companies like us spending tons of money on go-to-market activities without really managing expenses. And then inflation hit, pendulum swung back in the other direction. Things really tightened up in late 22 and early 23. And now I feel like we're somewhere in the middle, maybe even trending towards a more bullish scenario. And that impacts hiring. And are you seeing that?
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. I feel like the pendulum sort of swung in the direction. I would say, the second half of this past year, even past like Q1 of this year, where it's trending where firms are opening up a lot more positions. There's a lot more, mobility that's going on, promotion from within. You're seeing a lot of that, which is creating new positions within the firms itself. You can't promote from within without opening up a new position. So that's always a beautiful thing when firms have the ability to do that. So you're seeing that. You're seeing vertical moves, within the industry. You're seeing lateral moves, which is always nice, which means there's something that's driving someone to move, whether it's compensation increases, whether it's, new technologies that are being brought by the new firm that a person might go to, new opportunities. Whenever there's movement and people not getting let go, that's a great thing. When you see people getting let go and positions not being backfilled, that's when there's trouble. But you're seeing, the second half of this year, a lot of good mobility.
Yeah. Well, and I had a short stint, like I told you, in the staff aug world with tech systems. I mean, it was literally, what's that?
Not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not. And, they like, it's a, it flows downhill, right? So corporations tighten up, they start to manage outside legal spend, law firms tighten up. I would imagine placements go down significantly. So you're on the front edge of seeing how bullish or bearish these firms are. And it sounds like they're starting to move in the direction of optimism. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. We've been getting calls lately, from clients or potential clients, that are demoing AI tools. So they're looking for adoption of AI tools and machine learning. And, here's what we're looking for, very specific stuff. So when you have the specifics out there, that means probably that they purchase these tools, which is always a good thing. So that shows that obviously when projects are going on and programs and, different deployments, the staffing has to come behind that. You can't do it without the bodies. Of course, you could have an MSP or an augment, but, a lot of times you want to keep the knowledge, especially when it's AI and, new, next generation stuff. You want to keep that knowledge in-house if you can, and, just really hold on to it.
That makes sense. What areas of tech are you seeing the most growth? Like you mentioned machine learning. I would imagine data science. I'm seeing a lot more data teams. Like what's growing in legal right now?
Yeah, data science is a huge area. I mean, and that's an area I love recruiting in as well. It's like a lot of fun because there's so many different directions within data science that you could actually like take a different department. You have the analytics aspect where you're really, visualizing the information, you're intaking it, you're calling the data. You have the data science part where you're actually modeling it. You're making business decisions and you're forecasting based upon data. I mean, how incredible is that you have the opportunity to do that, and you have people that can actually do that, and technology that can assist in that. So, to have that in-house where you can help and almost have a McKinsey or a Deloitte where you don't necessarily need, the third party to help you. You have your own staff that's going to help make these decisions. That's a beautiful thing right there. So, to answer your question without being too long-winded, we're seeing, data science, that's a huge area. Teams that, to build out of that. Cloud is a big area, of course. Everybody's taking, the infrastructure, the applications. They're slowly but surely moving that to the cloud, whether it's Azure or AWS. And there's just a lot of great things happening within the industry. Call me an optimist, but I can feel like that sort of, flow.
Yeah, I mean, we used to be a consulting organization called AcroWire. We rebranded and launched as a product company 3 years ago, and we only run in the cloud. We literally can't run on-prem. Yeah, so and that's the way of the future. And we've had to say no. I mean, a couple of times to some big firms who wanted us to run on-prem, and it's not where the puck is going. So, all our chips are on the future, and the cloud is it. But man, it took way longer than it should have. Like, I was out beating the cloud drum literally in like 2013. I did, or maybe it was 2014, a bunch of road shows. I was doing webinars on, back then it was called Office 365, why you needed to move to SharePoint Online and Exchange Online. And that went exactly nowhere until literally shortly after COVID, big AmLaw firms started to move in earnest. There were a few who moved messaging into the cloud earlier, because I'm sure there's people out there saying, wait a second, okay, you had Exchange pre-COVID, but firms are really just now moving those ancillary workloads. And it's not all the firm's fault. A lot of the vendors, like on the practice management side, those solutions are still on-prem. Yeah. Elite and Aderant Expert are still on-prem. They are now starting to move in earnest to the cloud. But so our chips are on the table, man. It's cloud or bust for us. And you know what? Business is good. So we're growing like leaps and bounds. So it's happening for real, finally.
Well, you're definitely practicing what you're preaching, right? So if you're telling your clients, hey, listen, let's integrate, let's innovate, and then you're on-prem, I mean, what does that say in itself?
It's a great point. In fact, I'm not going to say any names, but there's a law firm who has a subsidiary that's really focused on innovation, and they're on-prem. They're finally moving to the cloud, but for a good bit they weren't. And I was like, man, that's a bit of a conflict. But they did a lot of work in financial services, and financial services which I spent 10 years at Bank of America. I know that world really well. And in fact, I was in like corporate audit, anti-money laundering, regulatory relations, consumer risk, all on the risk side of the house. And regulators are just make things really difficult for big banks. So managing third-party counter risk, which law firms fall into that category, a lot of times it was the clients holding them back from going to the cloud.
Absolutely. Yeah, you see it time and time again. Depending upon who your client is, depends upon like how innovative you might be able to get. You see some of the firms that are working with like the big financial services companies, and they're probably a little less likely to get a little bit innovative as opposed to organizations that are working with venture capital firms or pre-IPOs where, you know what, you don't have necessarily like FINRA or the SEC looking at things. You're sort of, let's go with the flow and let's develop some stuff.
Yeah. The regulated industries make it difficult. They present challenges. How much of like competitive pressures between firms are driving the innovation? We talked earlier about like firms trying to differentiate themselves. I mean, eventually, Gen AI is going to be table stakes. It's not yet today, but it will be at some point. But are you seeing competition among firms in terms of trying to compete and waving that innovation flag?
Yeah, I feel like firms don't want to get left behind. They don't want to be named, as far as like, the organization that just hasn't gotten around to doing it, or they haven't come up with the right sauce yet. I feel like, especially, it's not competitive apples to apples where you have firm A wanting to compete with firm B. But when you're dealing with different tiers of firms, or, firms that are in life sciences or M&A work, they're going to want to keep up with firms that are, may be in competition for the same clients, or, different caseloads, because I think that could be a differentiator right now. In the future, it might not be, once it becomes more of a template as opposed to like, a differentiator. But for right now, I do feel like it could be a differentiator.
Yeah. What about what you mentioned data science and obviously Gen AI, but like looking forward, maybe let's say to the first half of 2025, like for folks that are maybe on the business of law side, what are some areas that you anticipate continued or expanded growth for new roles, for new opportunities?
So I think firms that, really play in the high tech area. I think that, if you're working in the high tech area and you have practice groups surrounding that, you're going to need to keep up with the Joneses. That's, just plain and simple, where if you don't do that, that's where it can cost you a potential client if you're not considered cutting edge. If you're working with, big bank, it's not going to matter so much. It's really not going to be a differentiator. They're going to look at the attorneys they've always worked with. Hey, let's continue to work with this firm. But when you're talking about, you know, um, you know, high tech, you're talking about, intellectual property stuff, where it does rely upon a lot of, data. Any industry that relies upon like a ton of data being input and filtered out, those are going to be the areas where the firms are going to rely upon more on the high tech stuff.
Well, for like, let's say somebody in KM or innovation, and they're looking for lateral or upward mobility, like what sort of skills should they be developing besides the obvious, right? Like, I mean, obviously you need to be familiar with AI, but I mean, are you still seeing like, but it's funny, machine learning's been around forever,
Yeah.
and we don't hear about it as much, but like, I'm sure there's still opportunities in that realm too, or what sort of skills should like individuals be thinking about for mobility purposes?
So if I'm a person that's growing in my career and I really like data and I like data science, you really want the scripting and the automation down. I think that, Python's become such a big thing. That whole stack, that PyTorch, like there's just a ton of stuff within there where, if you really get a feel on like the actual coding and the automation, there's going to be a lot of opportunities in front of you. Plain and simple. I think that that's an area where I've seen, we've placed people in this area specifically with, Am Law 50 firms, where if they have that skill set and they're working with AI and ML, and that's an area where you can learn, or you can raise your hand in an organization and say, hey, listen, no one's doing this right now at the firm. I'd love to take a course. You want to align yourself with people that have these sort of skill sets as well, that are in the community that you may know, and find out how they've gotten from point A to point B.
Okay. That's a great segue into my next question, which is at Bank of America, like I always had a mentor,
Yeah.
right? So I was there almost 10 years, and I'm just naturally a good networker. I know not everybody is. It's a genuine, like, I love to meet people. That's why I'm good at hosting a podcast. Like, I don't have any training in this. Like, and it was never a goal of mine, but I genuinely enjoy conversations like this and getting to know people. And that makes it easy for me. It's not easy for everybody though. You know what I mean? It's like some people get super anxious. But from where I sit is you really need to push yourself. If you want to grow comes from being uncomfortable. Growth comes from being uncomfortable, right? If you stay in your comfort zone, you're not growing. My wife and I own 5 gyms here in St. Louis, and that's like on the wall at all 5 of these gyms, right? Like growth is in your growth is not in your comfort zone.
Yeah, I absolutely. Not everybody has in their DNA to do that, but at the end of the day, it's something that, like, even if you're uncomfortable and even if you're a little bit of an introvert, that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to avoid this, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I'm not like a full extrovert. Like, it's a spectrum. You've got introvert, and I think they call them ambiverts or omnivert. Yeah, I think it's ambiverts. But I'm kind of in the middle. Like, I really enjoy this kind of stuff. But after I go to like IltaCon, for example, like I want to be in a dark room by myself for like 3 days. Like, it just drains me. Some people come back energized from that. But, it's like a ton of meetings, and I'm usually presenting, and there's parties after the show, and I'm wiped out, man. So
Yeah, absolutely. You need to be in like an Aaron Rodgers dark room or something like that.
exactly. Yeah. I tell my wife, I'm like, don't like, please take care of the kids. Like, I'm going to go just decompress for a little bit. But I do think it's really important. Where I was headed with that was like, I think it's important to have mentors.
Yeah.
And, I always did when I was the period of time where I was in the corporate world. How important is that in the legal space? And how would people go about finding one?
Yeah. I mean, if you ask most people that are at the C level now, they'll say that they had a mentor. So that just shows how important it is. It's not the easiest thing to find a mentor. I mean, they don't grow on trees. There's not people that are always willing to do it. I think that you need to find someone that's like-minded, and it's as easy as, sending an email on LinkedIn or connecting with someone and just saying, hey, I love your work, or great article. And people understand if you're genuine about something, I think they'll put the time aside to make the time to take you under their wing. And I feel like a lot of people, especially in the legal technology industry, and this is part of the reason why I love recruiting in it, a lot of people are selfless, where they do want to take time to give back or pay forward. And, that's a great thing, and I feel like best way to find a mentor is just to take a chance, reach out to someone that maybe you look up to, whether you know them or not. I think it's probably better if you're in the same city as someone, or if you're part of a group. I know that different cities have innovation groups, or, legal technology, like, coffee or whatever the case may be. I've seen some stuff for the holidays out there, so there are groups out there that exist where you can find someone that will want to take you under their wing. But first things first is identifying what you want to be, and then you could find a mentor that way.
Yeah. And, I've always found a good approach for engaging is finding common ground. It could be something as simple as where you went to school. Like, I was talking to Avanish. She's the CEO at Latera. We just recorded an episode, so it will have been released by the time this episode gets released. And man, he's a big UNC fan, and it was just common ground that we had, and that common ground goes pretty deep. Like, I went to school there. I got married on campus. Like, I watch every basketball game, even if I don't see it live. I record it and I watch every play.
I'm a UNC basketball fan too, actually. So
nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Back from the Hubert Davis days, Stackhouse, Wallace, Vince Carter. I mean, I can't say I was a fan when MJ was there, but otherwise,
I actually was, but I was young. So let's see. So they won it, and that was like 82. So I was 10. So I got into the Heels because I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, and you're either a Virginia or a North Carolina fan. It's like literally right on the border. So I do remember that championship against Georgetown, but it was always a dream to go to school there. When I did, it was amazing. But, it doesn't have to be like where you went to school. It could be a common interest that you have, right? Like, there's so much. I sometimes get called an AI expert, like, but I'm really not. I'm an enthusiast. I read about it a ton, right? So I'm always reading new papers when they come out. I follow the thought leaders in the space. I'm always experimenting with it. Which is a good time. It could be something like that as well, to find common ground, to just say, hey man, I saw that post you did about, the new version of Llama 3. And I think that's some really cool stuff that you're doing. I'd love to learn more about it. Strike up a conversation. And then once you build some rapport, you can ask if they'd be willing to meet with you periodically.
Absolutely. Yeah, that stuff doesn't happen overnight, but if you put the time in, there is the common interest, you will definitely like strike a chord with someone that does have some common interests, some common values, and that's how relationships are built up. But I couldn't agree more that like it's open in this industry, if you find the right person.
Totally. Yeah. What about like folks who are thinking about, again, lateral or upward mobility and finding whatever, it could be practice areas or firms that, what's the, like, how should people be thinking about the next step? Like, is it, I don't think like just finding a bigger law firm to work for is the right approach. I mean, yeah, you might be able to learn a few new things as law firms scale, but like, I don't know. Personally, I think culture is really important. What should people be thinking about when they're charting their mobility path?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a, a matter of who you're going to be working for and who you're going to be working with. That's the biggest question you always have to ask yourself when you're interviewing is, would I want to work with this group? But not only that, say that you're, for example, in the AI team, right? You're in a so-called AI team. What are the developers like that I would be working with? What are the applications manager the peripheral teams that you have to deal with on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis? Am I going to enjoy working with them? And I would even go as far as saying, like, during an interview process, you don't want the process to be too long, but you do want to meet with some people that, you may not work with daily, like, they may be peers, but people that like your happiness is going to depend upon like, your interactions with them or not. So I would say the people, the firm culture, just like, every firm's a bit different, each sham law 10 firm is a bit different. Every firm has their own flavor. So it's finding, what you're looking for in your next step. Compensation doesn't do everything. So you want to look at, once you get your paycheck at the end of the week, what's driving you? What's going to make you happy? You spend so much time at work, what's going to, put you in a good mood going home on a given day, versus like, hey, like I need my day brightened up, that sort of scenario.
Yeah. How much variation are you seeing in like organizational design and titles across firms? Like from where I sit, so in the 16 years that I've been selling into KM and IT, we've worked with over 110 AM law firms, so a huge number, more than half. And it seems like everybody does it different, like from an organizational design perspective. Like sometimes AI sits in KM, sometimes AI sits in innovation, sometimes AI sits in IT, which does not make sense to me. Like maybe the infrastructure management needs to live in IT, but whoever's managing AI has to be close to the user to understand the use cases and to be that conduit between tech but yeah, how much variation do you see? You see it more than me because that's your full-time job. Do you see a ton of variation in role titles and all that sort of stuff?
A ton. I mean, it's unquestionably like, something that I deal with every day, different titles, different boxes, different groups. So I'd say that firms that are in the growth stage as far as like AI is concerned or dealing with innovation, it will probably sit under IT. I feel like there's not enough of a deviation between IT and AI at that point. But then once you have a bigger team and a bigger organization, you're going to be forced to make a separate like AI innovation team that's separate from IT, and it may sit under a managing partner. It may sit under the COO, where you have a chief innovation officer, you have a CIO, two different people reporting up to the same person. So then that way, both sides of the organization, equal playing field. And then also they're reporting to the same person, which obviously, is working closely with the stakeholders and the users and the clients.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What I moderated a panel actually it was this year, spring of 2024, with some heavy hitters in the space. It was like Meredith Williams from Gibson Dunn, Christy Bentz from Norton Rose, Peter Giovannis from McGuire Woods. And we talked about like organizational design and how AI is going to influence that and they all had different answers. And what we figured out is through that dialogue is that culture is really what dictates. Like some firms, even big firms, I know some AmLaw 50 firms, they don't have knowledge management. And sometimes the reason is because KM has a bad name. Like attorney, the culture there doesn't see the value in KM for whatever reason. It was probably, some failed experiment 10, 20 years ago, whatever. And the law firm leadership still has that in their memory banks. And they're still doing KM stuff. They're just calling it something else, like practice innovation or practice solutions.
Yeah.
So, but how are you seeing, like from a compensation perspective, which is related to organizational design, like, are you seeing things trend up? Like, is this a good time for people to be thinking about lateral or upward moves?
Yeah, this would be a great time. Once everybody receives their bonuses and all that, it's a good time to look because the bar's getting set higher and higher. Everybody, aside from like, the organizations that, do the reporting or they do the reports on compensation, I personally see, the trends bucking upward, where you're seeing it from the engineering level upward. So you can imagine, once you get into the management and C-suite, how much compensation's going up. And it's just, a lot of people know, what the industry is paying, per like, different groups, what level, size of firm. So firms have to stay intact with that, or they're not going to be able to get the talent that's going to be able to take their firm over the top.
Interesting. Because you have visibility on the compensation side, like what are some of the more lucrative roles on the business of law side? Is it KM, is it innovation, obviously emerging skills like AI? Like what is it? What's paying the best out there?
I think innovation, that term innovation, because it does include AI, it does include client-centric solutions that are being, developed for the different, companies that the firms are working with. So if you're in a situation like that where you're actually bringing business potentially, like either directly or indirectly to an organization, a firm's going to pay more for that. So if you're developing solutions in-house, either for your attorneys or for the clients, that's where it gets pretty lucrative. If you're just doing quote unquote, practice solutions where you're building out for some practices or you're taking third-party tools out of the box and you're customizing it, there's obviously a cap on that, but, an amazing area to be in is when you are developing solutions from scratch that you can make your own and sort of, win awards, peer awards and all that stuff. That really is pretty big time right now.
All right. So let's look at the flip side of that. Like where are areas where people may want to take chips off the table in terms of skills and, what roles are on the decline?
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say this, but it's not, nothing's completely off the table, but I think like the pure old school app development side is a little bit off the table. A lot of people are using Power Apps, they're using, the SharePoints of the world, Power Automate. They're using all those tools instead of like the .NET, JavaScript, the stack that everybody knows and grew up with, that's sort of fallen by the wayside. Now we're looking at more of the innovative, quick hitting tools where you can develop things a lot quicker and code than we used to be able to do.
Well, we talk about build versus buy all the time. So we don't really have any competition on the intranet side of the house. There used to be a player in the space. I won't say their name, but people know who they are, and they got bought by a much bigger company 7 years ago, and they're not even trying. So it's really just us or custom dev, right? Which makes zero sense for a law firm when there's an off-the-shelf solution. But, law firms get caught up in this. Like sometimes, devs want a dev, right? So if you got a dev team, they're going to pitch, hey, we can build this for this amount of dollars. Okay, great. That's your development. Your initial development cost is discrete. It has a beginning and an end. support and maintenance and enhancements, that goes on for the lifetime of the platform. And that is a huge component of the total cost of ownership for an app. But I see firms still making this mistake after there's been so many failures, and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I'm just seeing a little bit less of that. That was one area that definitely like stuck out to me. I mean, everything else, when you're talking about infosec, when you're talking about infrastructure, cloud, governance, all these things are, still like super hot, and there's different ways to do it and new things. But, app dev, is definitely an area that I think, they're finding newer ways, and there's just, less positions that are specific with the stack that, we're used to.
Yeah. I mean, when there's an off-the-shelf solution, I don't care if it's intranet or whatever, building your own is just law firms are not really structured. They're not built for developing software. It is a tough business. I had a post recently where I outlined just stream of consciousness, all the things you got to be good at. You got to be good at gathering requirements. You got to be good at designing system architecture. You got to be good at engineering, actually building the solution. You got to be good at QA. You got to be good at support. You got to be good at documentation. Like,
you need a PMO to do that. And those are some positions, obviously, we see those as well, a little bit less on the PMO side, but PMO, a lot of the PMO projects are surrounding development. So that makes a lot of sense, with the documentation, the QA requirements gathering, the whole nine.
It's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a lot. But it seems like the industry, is healthy. It's on the uptick. It's an exciting time to be in it.
Yeah, it really is. All right. So final question for you here. So how can candidates best position themselves in the marketplace? If somebody is, I think I told you the story again. I won't say the names, but I had a guest on. So this is one way you can position yourself. Get on a podcast like this, because I had someone a guest who was talking about all the amazing process work she was doing at her law firm. I had a previous guest of the podcast, like 20 episodes earlier, who became a fan and a listener. He heard that, went and sniped her, and now she works with him, and they both sent me thank you notes. I don't want the firm mad at me that she came from, so I won't say the name, but that's obviously one thing, is getting your name out there. What are some other things people can do to best position themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like take part in an ILTA, even if you're part of like planning, even if you don't want to speak, that's totally fine. Be part of that. Be part of, any sort of group that's going to, really put yourself out there, where you're thinking, what, well, I can sort of maximize here and, position myself as a potential candidate in the market, and I always tell candidates the best time to make a move is when you're not, actually looking. So it's a scenario where connect with people on LinkedIn. You see what firms are, hiring a lot. Connect with the CIO there, so they know that you're out there and you're potentially willing to take a look. So that's a good way to position yourself as well. It's just, see what's going out there in the industry. Talk to individuals like myself, of course, because we get the, the current before it hits, and just really, decide, hey, listen, maybe I want a little bit of a more thorough LinkedIn profile. I think that's something like, get some of the keywords out there, even if you're not active. That way, like, you could be identified as potentially a good, target for some people. And all it takes is one right opportunity, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Exactly. All right. So along those lines, since we're wrapping up here, how do people get in touch, find out more about what you do, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Hey, the best way, because, as a recruiter, you always have to be on LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Jeff Zodda, Geoff, Zodda, Zodda. Invite me to connect. I will happily connect with you. Reach out whenever you want. I always, respond to messages, and I'm out and about. So, feel free to reach out.
Good stuff, man. Well, hey, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you taking the time. Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. Let's talk some UNC hoops soon.
Yeah, exactly. Good stuff, man. All right.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content. Want to dive deeper into the world of legal innovation? Connect with us online at getinfodash.com, where you'll find additional resources and articles. You can also follow us on social media at getinfodash to stay updated on the latest news and insights in the field of legal tech and knowledge management. Once again, thank you for joining us today on Legal Innovation Spotlight, a fireside chat series hosted by Infodash.